Okay, hello everybody and welcome back to the fourth and final webinar in this series of Inside IRT's admissions process. My name is Brittany Zorn. I am the Arts and Sciences Program Specialist with the IRT. I am also a proud IRT alumna from the summer workshop class of 2013. And tonight I am riding solo. So if you have watched other recordings on IRT's YouTube page and you're wondering where my partner in crime, Leslie Godo Solo is, she's feeling a little under the weather tonight. So I am taking the reins in her stead so she can get some rest and it'll just be us chatting. Okay, so tonight's webinar is, we are going to discuss the components of one's academic background. And so if you remember from the first webinar in this series, where we provided an overview of IRT's admissions process, we talked about how the IRT has 4 categories across which they evaluate their applicants: their overall fit with the IRT mission, the essays that are required as part of our application, the recommendations which are required as part of our application, and then one's academic background being the 4th and final category. Tonight we're going to talk about what that means. What constitutes one's academic background. Okay, so here is an overview for tonight's webinar. We're going to talk about transcripts, GPA, and previous coursework. As we have done with the last 2 webinars, we're also going to provide the criteria which would constitute the highest ranking in the academic background category. In this instance, we're encapsulating that by saying the ideal academic background criteria. Again, if you watched the first webinar in this series, you'll remember that we shared that we evaluate applicants on a scale of 1 through 5 across the 4 categories: academic background, IRT mission, recommendations, and essays. And so the ideal academic background criteria will constitute a 5 on the IRT evaluation rubric. We'll also talk about how to write, or if you need to submit an optional statement of grades. We do have a GPA minimum here for the IRT application. So what if I don't meet that minimum? Or what if I have a semester where I didn't meet that minimum? Do I need to explain that? Also, we just came through the worst of a pandemic and we're still in it, even though some would say we're not. Whoops. And so you may have like a COVID related challenge that you want to communicate to either IRT or to a potential graduate school. So we'll talk about what does an optional statement of grades look like in the era of COVID-19. We'll then talk about the difference between a resume and a CV, since that is a major way that you will communicate your academic background to us through your resume or your CV. We'll do a quick reminder about recommendations. We'll do our final concluding slides, which encapsulate things you can be working on right now to submit your application on time for March 1st, how to submit an application review, and where to get additional info. All righty. So basically, your academic background is made up of these 3 categories: your transcripts, which obviously overview or detail your coursework that you have taken, and your GPA, and then also your professional experience. So its academic background is not just the experience you've had in the classroom. It can also include some of your professional experience, especially if you've been out of school for some time, or if you are interested in pursuing a graduate degree, which is going to put you very quickly into a job. So something like a Master's of Arts of Teaching, which within a year or 2 will get you into a classroom. But in the context of transcripts, coursework, and GPAs, what matters and what does the IRT need to see for the purpose of our application on March 1st? We only require unofficial transcripts or copies of your official transcript, because anytime you receive an official transcript, as soon as you open it, as soon as you either download the encrypted PDF or like literally open up the envelope and it's no longer sealed, it's no longer official. So once you request an official transcript for yourself, you open that document, it's technically unofficial now, because what makes it official is that it's securely sent and received from your previous institution to the recipient, either yourself or another institution or a place like IRT. So when we say we accept unofficial copies of transcripts, it could be that you've requested an official copy for yourself and you have that saved on your desktop on your computer. If you copy that and upload that, that's an unofficial version, and that's good enough for us. We don't need you to send an official copy directly from your previous institutions to the IRT office. That is not necessary for the purpose of the IRT application. Many institutions also offer, and you give you the option to request an unofficial transcript, because sometimes an official transcript costs money where an unofficial doesn't, or it's cheaper. Things like this, or sometimes it's faster to get an unofficial transcript, and that's fine as well for the purposes of the IRT application. We want transcripts from every institution where you've earned college credit. For some, that can be a lot of institutions, especially if you've had a winding journey, to higher education, or if you've taken a lot of additional courses over the summer or in winter term, things like that. The application itself, the IRT application itself, I believe gives you the space for 6 or 8 transcripts for you to upload into the application. If you have more than that, all you have to do is email myself or Leslie or the generic irt@andover.edu email account and attach the transcripts that you were not able to upload to the application itself. And you can even say, Brittany told me in the webinar to send my transcripts to one of these people, so I'm sending them, and thank you. Great question, Aquele, about dual enrollment. So yes, ideally we would also see any dual enrollment credits, transcripts for any dual enrollment credits you earned in high school. Yeah, I was gonna keep talking, but I answered the question. The answer is yes. Now, if you have an issue getting a transcript, to your point, maybe this is what I can continue to say. We sometimes have folks who have trouble getting transcripts from study abroad institutions or high schools for whatever reason. That's also manageable. Just again, communicate with the IRT, technically I have these credits, or, these credits are represented on my undergraduate transcript, although I was not able to obtain a transcript directly from my study abroad institution or from my high school. You can see them represented here on this transcript, something like that. That's totally agreeable. So if you have a particular challenge, just communicate with us and we can either make an exception or come up with a workaround that allows you to still apply and be considered. Summer coursework, like I said, or J-term, winter term stuff, and then any community college credits. So what we're looking for in your coursework is certain disciplines will have prerequisites for their advanced degrees. So something like a PhD in psychology often expects you to have an undergraduate degree in psychology, or at the very least expects you to have particular courses, like foundational courses within psychology, represented in your previous coursework. So maybe you weren't a psych major, maybe you were a psych minor, or maybe you majored in something unrelated, but then in the years since graduating or through, professional development opportunities, tuition reimbursement program, something else, you've since taken coursework in psychology. And so that is part of what we're looking for, is does this student have the foundational exposure to this courses in this discipline if that's required. History is also a field that's kind of stringent like that. They really want you to have some core, history 101, global history, American history, usually ancient history, and then some other regional histories can kind of be interchangeable depending on what your particular area of focus is. Not every field is like this though. Sociology frequently accepts scholars who don't necessarily have a straight up undergraduate degree in sociology. More so what a program in the social sciences like that is looking for is, do you have research experience within the discipline of sociology, or that's closely related in a field like maybe women's studies or any of the cultural studies, identity studies kinds of programs. It's not always a perfect correlation either. Certain programs like Masters of Arts of Teaching, much more stringent on prerequisite coursework than PhDs, where the emphasis is really on your research skills and ability, and that you have foundations in doing research within a particular discipline. So if you're worried about these things, or if you want to have a conversation about these things, you can certainly reach out to the IRT beforehand, myself or Leslie or someone else. But also this is something that your IRT advisor would really talk through with you once you're admitted. So for the purposes of our application, we're not scrutinizing this too deeply. We're constantly making exceptions for folks and taking bets on, underdog applicants who have the drive and have the passion and have the perspective to do a particular degree, but maybe didn't have the foresight, didn't have the information to make more informed choices about coursework, and it's expensive. And, we get it. We get that it's a burden. I mean, that it's a challenge or an obstacle for the kinds of scholars who come to IRT to have the perfect linear path from the womb to the PhD. So we're always, being really flexible with these requirements. The only real major red flag is if you have a poor grade, like a failing grade in a major class. So a class that's foundational to your what am I trying to say? The graduate degree that you're aspiring towards, or that was part of your major. If it's a core course part of your major, that's a red flag, because it'll be a red flag for graduate programs. And so if you do have a semester or a particular class that was required for your major or is closely related to the work you hope to do, that is something we would welcome an explanation on. And your explanation does not need to be apologetic, but we will get to that when we're talking about writing a statement of grades. And this is just reiterating that IRT does have a GPA minimum of a 3.0 for undergrads and a 3.5 for graduate degrees. Again, we're always making exceptions to this. So if you're wondering if your 2.89 or if your 3.4 is good enough, or should you still apply, definitely reach out, but definitely still apply. For sure, still apply. Do not see this and think, oh my gosh, I don't meet this, I'm not going to submit an application. Every year we admit scholars who don't quite meet the ideal criteria. And I would say that's the majority of IRT applicants. Okay. I know I'm kind of going fast and I'm talking a lot, so please do feel free to interrupt or ask questions as they're coming up. So this is what we consider the ideal criteria for your academic background, or what constitutes a 5 in this category. Again, a 5 is if you remember back to webinar 1, a 5 is something like exceptional. A 4 is something above average. A 3 is something average. A 2 is below average, and a 1 is really poor, something like this. I don't remember the exact words that we use, but most people are in the range of average, average to above average. I'd say that's pretty typical of an IRT applicant. So a 5, certainly, if you hit all these things and you're ranking a 5, it's yeah, it's ideal. It's the best case scenario for you. But we don't really specialize in serving 5 applicants, 5-star applicants. We kind of specialize in serving more average applicants who have a blend of strengths and weaknesses that we help them package in a way that's legible to graduate schools. Okay, so GPA meets or exceeds the requirement. Certainly that puts you in the top tier. If you have a significant amount of coursework in your intended graduate school discipline, that also makes you an especially competitive applicant. If you're pursuing a PhD, if you have formal research experience, or if you're pursuing a more practical-based program like an MAT and you already have professional experience, both of those things go a long way for you. And in general, we can talk about how to market your formal and extracurricular and professional and paraprofessional experiences in a way that leverages the skills that are necessary or particularly highly sought out in your field. If you already have a completed writing sample or a significant piece of writing by the time you would submit your graduate school applications with us, which would be December 1st, that puts you in a really strong standing. Students who are currently working on a master's thesis or an undergraduate thesis, or who are currently enrolled in classes and want to use an independent study or something as their writing sample, and they're actively still writing it come fall 2023 and maybe even spring 2024, that is a tough, it's not impossible to apply in that instance. Many students do, but it definitely is putting a large expectation on yourself to do a lot of different things in one cycle. So it's ideal if you already have a major literary piece completed, it's already been submitted for grading or publication or whatever, and you don't have to write a massive piece of research paper or something like that alongside also curating your graduate school application materials. Again, not impossible, just this is ideal. The clearer you can articulate your research question or your area of investigation, your area for interrogation within your discipline, the better. So like as articulate as you can be, doesn't need to be so specific where you're like, I will observe 3 separate communities in this kind of environment across this many years and, code these kinds of behaviors and these sorts of participants. Doesn't have to be quite that specific. But for you to clearly be able to say, like, my question falls at the intersection of A and B, and what I'm specifically curious in is the impact of this within A on this within B, something like as clear and articulate as you can be. If you've received awards or accolades or been recognized by your field or your profession, that certainly puts you in the top category for academic background as well. So if you've been, recognized as an exceptional staff person, or if you've received, awards for excellence within your particular field, that definitely like earns you a 5 on the scale, the IRT evaluation scale. And then multiple extracurricular activities, which are related to your value, mission, and goals, that also puts you in that 5 category, sets you apart. So, in addition to the fact that you've worked 3 jobs, you've taken an extra class every semester, you're double majoring and minoring, and you're also taking care of loved ones. Have you also volunteered? And, have you also taken on an unpaid internship at the library? I mean, this is pretty typical of IRT applicants, just like an embarrassment of experience and riches, in the sense of you're all are very accomplished. How are we doing? Any questions about requirements or like my distinguishing between the what constitutes like an ideal candidate versus like the kind of typical applicant we see?
Yeah, I have a question real quick on like the writing sample.
Yeah.
So I of course have research papers that I wrote when undergrad for sociology and both political science.
Great.
Is there like a certain, I don't know, I guess like the guidelines for a writing sample? Like, is there a certain length? Like I have some that range from like 5 to 10 pages. Should I look to make it longer, or just any guidance on that?
Totally. For the purposes of your IRT application, we won't require a writing sample from you, right? So you don't have to worry about that in the short term. But for your PhD applications, you're going to be looking at a range of like 10 to 20 pages, especially for you in like a political science sociology field. Definitely going to be in like the 15 range, like as like an average, a target average. Some programs will allow you to upload 2 separate papers together that meet a page minimum. So like if you had 2 7 to 10 page papers and their minimum was like 15 to 20 or something like that, sometimes that works. I think typically whatever writing sample you're going to use or whatever writing sample you're thinking about, you definitely want to plan some revision time, like especially if it's been more than a year. I mean, I know you said you just graduated like a year ago, but like you're coming up on more than a year, right? Since you've like looked at that document or received feedback. I'm sure it was graded and you maybe even got feedback from the professor. If you haven't incorporated that feedback, that was, those like critical commentary that you received when you got your grade, I would encourage you to go back to review that, incorporate that if possible. And definitely like at least you would want to revise it. And so upon revising it, it could get longer or shorter. And like definitely that is fine. But you want it to reflect your most recent voice, right? Your most informed scholarly perspective. Yeah, and I think longer is better typically for PhDs in the social sciences and humanities. Like 15 to 20 is more of the standard than like 5 to 10.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Cheers, you're welcome.
I have a question that's somewhat unrelated, but I was wondering, so online I noticed that it said that that coursework will be available sort of like virtually for people who you can be anywhere. Is there a certain amount of time that's synchronous, like that people would need to take time off of work for, or is it all kind of self-paced? You could keep your job throughout the summer as you're within the program.
That's a great question. Yeah, so certainly you can keep your job. We're very sensitive to the fact that like who can afford to quit their job to go do like some thought work? That's like it's all well and good that you have this academic interest, but I don't think it's realistic that we would ever be able to expect IRT scholars could, honestly in a fair and just way actually like leave their jobs for the purposes of participating in this program. That being said, it's not necessarily easy, to work a full-time job and apply to a dozen graduate schools with IRT. It certainly requires a lot of time management, and it certainly requires that you are your own best self-advocate. And I mean that like as strongly. If I could give you one piece of advice, it's like you have to be willing and able to communicate with IRT when and if you're struggling, or even just proactively saying like, these are the things that I need to be able to do this program or to be successful through the next few weeks or days or whatever the assignments are. And we give you everything in advance. We give you a syllabus that has all of the dates and times of things. We have a Canvas course that you'll get access to as soon as you're admitted, which you can start to poke through required assignments and start to see summer schedules. The summer classes in particular, because we only started doing this in 2020 when COVID forced us all to be completely virtual. We're still like figuring out some, like, I think like this will be the best years, basically. Like, it's still so new that we don't have like a lot of precedent for like, oh, like this is how you sign up and this is what the options are. Like, we're still kind of in that like improving as we go, like building the plane and flying it mode. And so this year is actually the first year where we're going to intentionally have faculty, IRT alumni serving as summer faculty in particular regions, and try to like have options for scholars in those regions. So like that you could take a class with, if you're in California, you could take a class with someone who's also in California. And this is the first year we're really trying to be intentional about that, because we've just seen how difficult it is for people who are in California or Puerto Rico or France, Europe, to like align with people who are only teaching from an East Coast schedule. So yeah, definitely doable to keep your job, definitely opportunities to watch things asynchronously and to participate, to self-pace through all of the IRT assignments and webinars throughout the whole year, but certainly also through the summer. Different faculty have had different requirements about, this is a class that is really best if you can attend in person versus this is a class you can do completely asynchronously. So there's a little bit of a range. There's some options. It's kind of based on what individual faculty like schedules and interests are as well. So yes, and is kind of my answer to that. Did that help?
That was super helpful. Thank you so much.
Totally. Cool. Excellent. Okay. So what if I do want to write a statement of grades? What if I have, a little blemish on my transcript that I'm not proud of, or I was just going through some things, I was sick, my family was sick, maybe tragically you've lost some close loved ones over the last few years. You would be in good company with a lot of IRT scholars who've really been going through it because of this pandemic and climate change and, the socio-political climate in this country and lots of things, right? So there's plenty of reasons why, like, maybe you didn't perform to your absolute best capacity in a class or in a set of classes for any given semester over the last 3 years, or in your whole life. Obviously, of course, this extends like beyond COVID as well. So to talk about this, the one thing we can say is you just don't want to be apologetic when you write a statement of grades. This is not your opportunity to like defend yourself. You shouldn't feel like you're on the, being defensive in this. It really should just be a clear and straightforward articulation of what happened and the steps you took to improve. I faced these challenges, which prevented me from performing at my best capacity. You can get into as much detail about those challenges as you feel comfortable with. So some people are open books and are just like, let me tell you exactly what's going on. Other people are like, I was dealing with some family medical issues. Like, either of those is fine. The amount of detail and depth that you explain about what you were going through is kind of up to you, but just say, I had these factors which prevented me from performing at my best. Here are the steps that I took. As soon as I was able to recognize this, or as soon as it was brought to my attention that I was underperforming, this is what happened. I talked to my advisor. I reached out to my professors. I quit one of my jobs. I reduced my hours in the writing center. I stopped going home on the weekends. I, found a new study space, whatever. I got a mental health evaluation, learned I had ADHD, like whatever happened, articulate those things that changed and always show like an upward trend. I went through some things, didn't work out for me so great, realized this was happening, took these steps, didn't have any problems after that, or like saw an upward trend in my performance and my capacity ever since, and like have just continued to do better. So that's the like very simple, straightforward narrative that you want to tell with a statement of grades. And for IRT's purposes, like we're all a bunch of bleeding hearts over here. You know, we are like super empathetic to our students' situations. And so you really can't go wrong for writing this for us. And then you'll work with your IRT advisor to like really perfect it for your graduate school applications if that's necessary. Okay. Resume CV. Does anybody have a CV already? I'm sure some of you do. Mhm.
Yes, I do. This is Robin Wilson. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Robin. Perfect. Okay, we had some hand raises. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Great. Do I even need to go through this slide? I think everyone on the call just said they have a CV already. I mean, I can just say quickly, the big difference is the resume is focused on your professional experience and really is limited to 1 to 2 pages. Never submit a resume that's more than 2 pages long. A CV is a complete and comprehensive record of your academic, educational, and scholarly experience. And I have seen CVs that go into the 25-page range. I kid you not, excuse me. I forgot this was recorded and going on the YouTube page. So that's fun. But anyway, a CV is a complete record. Like you just never stop adding to it with your professional, educational, your educational and academic experiences. Any thoughts or questions about this? Do we want to spend more time on this, about the like formatting differences of it?
Do we choose one to submit? Or are we able to submit both?
That is a great question. Choose one to submit for the purposes of the IRT application. I would say if you're pursuing a PhD in graduate school, it makes sense to submit a CV. And if you're pursuing a degree in education, typically a resume is acceptable. Although for any graduate degree program, a CV would be appropriate. It might be based on what experience you have, right? Like if you just have more professional experience and less research or academic experience, feel free to submit the resume, and then you can work with your IRT advisor once you're in to like figure out how to format it and present it to a graduate program. So for our application purposes, pretty flexible based on like whatever your comfort level or experience is.
Perfect, thank you.
Cheers. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, so one of my questions is in regards to my interests, my academic research interest. So my academic research interest for a PhD would be to study effective strategies for teaching a second language to young people who have been diagnosed with dyslexia.
Okay.
And it's very, very specific. And so my question to you is, as I'm applying to the IRT and I'm considering my study opportunities, I haven't really, in my independent research that I've done, I haven't really found anyone in particular in a PhD program that focuses on that combination of research interests, but I have found some who focus on one or the other.
Yeah.
So if I were to apply to the IRT, is that something that in terms of my research interest that you could help me in terms of finding someone at an institution or multiple institutions that might be able to support my research interests?
Yeah, this is such a great question. So thank you for asking, Robin. The short answer is yes. Like just for peace of mind and to get cut straight to the point, yes, even though you are coming to the IRT with a really specific niche area of interest, and it's not really being yet done in the field, it would be part of your advising process with IRT, like talking about how do I identify faculty in or programs generally in these graduate schools that could support my pursuit of this specific line of inquiry, despite it not really yet existing. Like that, I mean, and in
That's
reality, that is like the essence of a PhD to begin with. Or, you know, if you're going to pursue a master's, but do like a thesis and you're really interested in research, what makes you a really strong candidate is that your idea is new and unique, and you are particularly qualified to carry out that research because of your professional personal experiences. So it probably feels intimidating that you're like, damn, this isn't on anyone's radar. Like, am I going to be admitted? But in reality, it actually makes you a really strong applicant, because that's kind of the nature of graduate education and knowledge production in higher ed and in the academy. So yeah, that's the short answer. Now, my longer answer is to say that you do not need to have a perfect match with graduate faculty in order to be a compelling or a competitive applicant to a department or program. And what I mean by that is, it's actually better for you to not have an exact match with faculty around their research interests, because it means that your research is so unique and contributive to the field that like a program is going to be really excited by the idea of getting to put their intellectual brand on your research, right? Like Yale is going to be like, damn, yeah, we want to be the place where the first research ever about teaching foreign languages to young students with dyslexia was done. We want that to happen at Yale. And so what we'll do is we'll talk about, and we do this, you know, sort of guidance with our admitted scholars in like large group advising, but then also in one-on-one conversations with your advisor. What we do is talk about, what does faculty fit look like when it's not a perfect match? So maybe you find faculty who are looking at just teaching foreign languages to young students. Maybe it's not specific to dyslexia, but they have a lot of research experience and professional experience in, you know, questions that you might also be interested in, like what are the, and this is me speaking clearly outside of my field of expertise, but like what are the neural pathways and brain processes that happen when you teach a fifth grader versus a third grader a foreign language? And what developmental things happen between third and fifth grade that make it easier or more difficult to teach a foreign language? And so maybe you find faculty who are like doing this kind of research, not a perfect fit with your research. Maybe you would have to seek out someone who specializes in dyslexia, either someone else in the department or at the institution, or in general, you would have to do like kind of make up some of that research like in your own independent study or like under the guidance of your faculty mentor. But could that faculty person who's specializing in the differences of foreign language education between third and fifth grade help you develop a research agenda? That's really what constitutes faculty fit and good faculty mentorship. Could that primary faculty person, even though they themselves do not possess expertise in all the areas that you're interested in investigating, could they help guide your pursuit of the right sources and knowledge and texts and theories? And could they, you know, say, well, I'm not doing this, but so-and-so at such and such institution is doing A, B, and the third, go connect with them, or let me connect you with them. My former mentor works with somebody who does dyslexia research at Chicago, whatever, let me, make that, facilitate that connection for you. So that's really what fit looks like. And that is kind of like the nepotistic brotherhood nature of, graduate and particularly PhD doctorate education. But that's what you would be looking to leverage and identify. Oh, look at me. I knew Yale had a dyslexia research center. I definitely knew that. It was all a part of the plan. It was an intentional metaphor, an example that I gave. So
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, we're getting to the end of the presentation where we're just having some reminders. So are there other questions or thoughts that are coming up about specifically academic background stuff or the application at all? Recommenders, since that's the slide that I'm on. Anything?
I see it says give them an earlier deadline than March 1st. Do all of them need to be in before we press submit, or how does that work?
Great question. No, you can submit your application even when your recommenders have not uploaded their recommendation forms. And actually, it would make sense for you to review the last webinar we did, which was about recommenders, because we talked about and actually showed you in the application portal, here's where you can check on the status of your recommenders, and here's what it looks like when they have submitted versus when they haven't. And here's like what this looks like after you submit all of your pieces, and how you can still like edit your recommendation info after the fact. So if you're like especially nervous about that, it's a short webinar, I think just 30 to 40 minutes from last week. Totally encourage you to revisit that. But yeah, you can submit your essays and all your demographic info and your transcripts and upload all the documents that you need to and hit submit. And it's okay if the recommenders come in after the fact. That being said, if you know that a recommender is going to not make the March 1st deadline, communicate with us before that and we won't penalize you. If it's radio silence from you and we don't know anything and you just only have 2 out of 3 recommenders come March 2nd, at like 8 a.m. or whenever we're in the office, technically your application is incomplete. And it's definitely more cumbersome to, after the application closes, get notifications from students and go back and like have to reopen it or like mark their application complete on the back end. So if you are worried that a recommender won't submit by March 1st, just be proactive and we'll happily let you do a workaround or give you some grace. Cheers, you're welcome. So we advise that 2 recommendations would be academic or from professors where you've taken classes. 1 would be professional. And last week's webinar, someone said, well, what if I've been out of school for a while and I have more readily 2 professional recommendations and only 1 academic? Totally appropriate for the purposes of the IRT application, but you do want to be thinking about ways to strengthen connections with potential academic letter writers for the purposes of your graduate school applications. So ideally for your master's or your PhD applications, you would have at least 2 academic or professor recommendations. So for IRT, less important, we'll accept kind of a range of recommendations, but for the sake of, you only really have like 8 months until you submit your PhD and master's applications. Sorry to freak you out, but like that's the facts. It's like 8 or 9 months from now. Start thinking about how you could potentially get 2 if you don't have 2 academic. And again, visit that webinar if you want more info. Helpful to provide recommenders with a copy of your resume or CV and at least your most recent transcript and probably a small blurb about, hey, I'm applying to this graduate preparatory program that has this, mission towards diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice and education. And they're going to assist me in applying to graduate school. I really want to get my PhD and whatever, my master's and whatever. And, our work together in this context was really impactful to me. Would you be willing to write a strong, positive letter of recommendation on my behalf? Now, the IRT application does not ask for letters of recommendation. We have a specific form. When you put in recommender info into the application, the form is emailed to them. We talked about, I see you in the chat. We talked about in the webinar last week that the reason why we have the form instead of just accepting a generic letter, we just have some really specific questions about your commitment to social justice and education issues, about your professional and academic experiences. And letters don't always get to all of that, especially when IRT is kind of a unique program. And sometimes letter writers don't fully understand what they're writing a letter for. So our form is really simple. It's 10 Likert scale questions and a couple of short answer questions. Okay. You can check the status of your recommendations from the applicant profile page. So yeah, we're just a few weeks away. Oh yeah, go ahead, Anya, question.
Yes, I have a quick question about the essays. So I believe it's essay 1 about the 3 citations. So I have my 3 citations and everything, and should they be in like an APA or MLA format? I have mine in APA.
That is a great question. What is the standard in your field?
Typically APA, so that's kind of what I did go with. Okay, so I got them APA, perfect. And so I saw that it's like each response should be like 150 words, or like a total of 450. So should I be writing like a paragraph for each individual citation that like all 3 of them together will equate to 450 words or less? Just trying to make sure that I do it correctly.
Totally. This is the second question that we've gotten like this, which was basically, am I writing one 450 word essay that dedicates 150 words to each citation, or am I writing like 3 smaller individual essay responses and they're each 150 words? Either is appropriate for the purposes
Okay.
of your IRT application. I think, you know, if you're trying to distinguish yourself between a 4 and a 5, like between an exceptional essay and an above average essay, then doing it succinctly in one unified essay that's 450 words is certainly like, you know, puts you a cut above the rest. But also if it's going to cause great agony and pain that you spend a lot of time trying to write this one beautifully unified and cohesive 450 word essay for these citations, I don't think that's like as useful as just writing like 3 individual, really clear and articulate 150 word summaries and explanations of their connection to your understanding of social justice. So, you know, the 5 category would be like the one unified essay that like perfectly weaves all of these 3 texts together and has like this one narrative about their impact on your perspective. But like also a 4, which is still above average, could just be clear, you know, individual 150 word blurbs. So
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
cheers. Yeah, good question. Yes. Yeah. The question, I'll just read the question in the chat for the sake of the recording. So all of these essays are submitted through the same text box. Like, and that was the question. Like, is that the case? Yes, that is the case. Yep. Cheers. Look at, you know, it does my heart good to see the attendees, the audience helping each other out. You know, we've got our repeat attendees being like, girl, I already know this info. Let me tell you. That's great. Thank you so much. Yes, definitely. Cool. Okay, so basically what you can be working on right now is just all the components of your application. The essay questions are available on the IRT website as well if you have not gotten into the application yet and you would like to just peruse those. Refresher, how do you submit an application? Well, first you have to attend an info session online. This is not technically the IRT info session proper. This is a smaller webinar series specifically targeted to people who are applying this cycle. The generic IRT info session for 23-24 is recorded and available on the YouTube page. To complete an application, well, I'll get to that question. That's great. To complete an application, go to andover.edu/IRT. You'll see a navigation bar up top. You click on application, and then from there, you'll be able to submit an inquiry form and actually start an application. The inquiry form gives you your credentials for the application portal and also ensures that you receive updates specifically related to IRT's admissions process and no other spam, we promise. And then in the application, you'll upload a resume, CV, transcripts, respond to the essays and your recommenders. And as of this year, virtual interviews are no longer required. We just saw that personal individual biases were too easily replicated and we were grappling too much with trying to account for all of that bias. And so we did away with it. Cheers. And there we have it. So I'll leave this up for a second while I answer Camille's question so that if you want to copy this down or anything, you can, and then we'll get rid of the share screen and just have a little chat for the rest of the few minutes here. So the question for the recording is just like a general fun question, just, you know, kind of curious, just wondering, have there been any red flags that you've seen in past applications? And that is actually, you know, you joke, you jest and say it's light and fun, but that's a seriously good question and actually probably one that you would keep in your back pocket for any sort of like interview or open house space that you're ever attending in the future when the presenter is like, oh, do you have any questions? So I say this is a great question and is very informative. Now let me think about it. Have there been red flags? There certainly have been. What have been the greatest? I think mostly red flags have come through when we just see essays that are really underdeveloped. You know, lots of typos and just grammatical errors, or even not even just like grammatical errors, but like just like a lack of clarity, like not having unified sentences or like unified paragraph structure. And that's always a red flag because you have to do so much articulating yourself and writing just through the application process, never mind once you're actually in graduate school. Although once again, we always are serving like sort of average pool and not necessarily the high flying pool, the like highly above average pool. So that's not necessarily a disqualifier, but certainly that's like, you know, if we see a student who has like a really underdeveloped essay, we consider like, you know, we have a conversation with them if we admit them, that's like, it's going to be hard. Like, here are the things we're going to help you. We're going to like help you come up with the resources you need. We're going to help you manage your time. We're going to come up with a plan, but like, this isn't where it needs to be if you want this degree. And that's a hard conversation and it can be hard news to receive. But certainly that's like a big one. We've had some dicey interviews, you know, people who are like actively driving or like actively working and just like multitasking during an interview. And I suppose like red flag might be an extreme, you know, that's kind of like there's a certain connotation with the like term red flag, right? So maybe red flag isn't a fair term, but definitely it's like shocking to think that someone would interview for admission to something and not like dedicate full time aside for that, or at least not preface with their interviewer, I'm in a space where like I'm multitasking. And so like if there are interruptions, it's because this is my only option to have this interview is to do this while I'm doing this other thing. And so just like, thank you for your grace and patience. But again, we extend a lot of grace and empathy because we get that like maybe someone's just never had somebody to tell them that, right? Like maybe you've just never had to interview for something. Maybe you've never had somebody go through like interviews best practices with you, something like this. So yeah, I don't know that like red flags is really a fair term, but are there like some standout like parts of an application that indicate to us the student would have to work a little bit harder than maybe the typical IRT student in order to be successful? Certainly. Cheers. Other thoughts or questions, reflections, reactions, ruminations, requests, concerns, qualms, queries, inquiries? Y'all are going to submit some strong applications. That's what I know. Like, I'm about to receive how many people I have here? I'm about to receive 9 new IRT scholars for 2023. Cheers. Y'all are great. That's right. Speaking it into existence. Around here, you reap what you sow. Cool. Totally agree. Oh, sure. This is a great question. So for the purpose of the recording, I'll speak it to the audience. How many students do you typically accept each year? So we typically, before COVID-19, would receive about 250 to 300 applications and would admit about 150 scholars. After COVID-19, things have fluctuated a whole bunch. We've had like a drop in application numbers. We've had a drop in capacity because we've been understaffed for a couple of years. Wow, I'm just looking at myself and realizing how terrible my lighting is. So sorry, guys. But anyway, so this year we're looking to admit probably about 130 to 150 if we can squeeze it out. And last year we only received about 150 applications. So it was like really low last year, like almost cut in half the applications we usually receive. So yeah, it kind of depends. I'll just elaborate a little bit more for just an FYI. In the face of COVID-19, we've actually gotten a lot more flexible with students deferring like their IRT participation and acceptance. So previously, like if a student was admitted and then like declined the offer or was admitted and worked with us for a while and then needed to withdraw, we would typically have them reapply. Like even if it was the next consecutive cycle, like submit a new application. in the face of the last 3 years, reapplying when you've already shown us that you are qualified, within like a 12-month window, it just felt really unnecessarily burdensome and like making y'all do things just for the sake of doing things, like for the sake of process, for the sake of it. And that's foolishness. Ain't nobody doing that around here. So we've done away with that. And now we basically allow students to defer their IRT participation for like a year or two. Yeah, formalities. Like who has the time? Like ain't nobody got the time for that. We're all just trying to like get by. So yeah, now you can defer for up to a year or two, depending on your personal circumstances. So like if you applied, you're admitted, and then like, oh, I actually got this fellowship and it's going to take me, 2 years to complete the fellowship. Okay, great. We'll just track you for admission in 2025 instead. Thank you. Yes. So the comment was, I appreciate how reflective or like reflexive the program is. It's taken us some time to develop those nimble skills, to be like very responsive to our students. But I mean, what does it mean to be student-centered? It doesn't mean, prioritize an arbitrary policy that we created over a student's like lived experiences and needs, right? Like it seems so obvious, and I'm laughing because it seems so obvious now, but it wasn't always obvious. So I appreciate that you can identify that. And I see we have another hand, so I'll do Robin and then I'll ask the question in the chat.
I just have one more question. So my question is in regards to PhD programs. Now, primarily I'm interested in PhD programs here in the United States. However, I am interested in also applying for a Fulbright fellowship or scholarship to help cover the expense or cost of a program. And so if that is something that I obtain, then my question is, sometimes they require you to do your study outside of the United States because it's like an exchange experience as well as a research, academic research experience. And I'm asking that question because last year I did a Fulbright Hayes fellowship in Brazil, and it wasn't unlike a Fulbright, some Fulbright programs, it wasn't a full year program, and it was for teaching. So I'm asking the question because I'm just trying to understand what my option would be if I wanted to pursue that as a possible funding option for graduate school.
Totally. So first of all, you apply. Like, yes, apply, definitely. The IRT does not limit our scholars from pursuing opportunities outside of the IRT consortium set of graduate schools, and we actively encourage our scholars to pursue external funding sources. And so Fulbright is certainly a popular one. The National Science Foundation, the Ford Fellowship, predoctoral and dissertation fellowship, the PD Soros New American Fellowship. There's a whole handful that are like fairly common amongst IRT scholars, and we will provide support on those fellowship applications. You can, tell your IRT advisor, I'm applying to these things. Can we arrange time to talk about these things specifically? Or do you have best practices or advice or resources on Canvas that I can utilize in preparing these materials? We actually host an alumni panel. So we do like a bunch of alumni panels throughout the program. And one of the panels that we've specifically started offering in the last few years is folks who've earned or applied to successfully external massive fellowship programs like Ford and Fulbright and NSF and Gates Millennium and Gates Cambridge and all that. So yeah, definitely doable. You can also apply internationally to other graduate schools. So you were kind of alluding to, like, if I do get a Fulbright, then like I might need to commit to studying in the UK or somewhere else. Yeah, IRT does not limit you in applying outside of our consortium of graduate schools. So like we have a partnership with 40 some odd graduate institutions that are in the US, but we'll support you in applying internationally or to other schools in the US that are not in our consortium. The one caveat is that like we can't guarantee a fee waiver for you at those institutions because our consortium relationship, our partnership with the schools is that they agree to waive the fees on your behalf. So we don't like pay your fees for you. It's the institution that we've partnered with is agreeing to waive the fee for an IRT applicant. So you're not going to get that same guarantee at a non-consortium school that includes international schools. And there's a whole set of considerations when you're applying internationally, which is like a subset of expertise that IRT is like co-creating with our international applicants every year, and continuing to like foster what institutional knowledge we have around that. But like this year I'm working with someone who lives in the UK as a UK citizen, like, and is applying to graduate schools in the US, and so that's a whole set of considerations. And then alternately I worked with someone who was from Puerto Rico and was like very interested in applying to schools in Spain because that was like relevant to their interests, and they had a linguistic connection. Like it would be easy for them to go to Spain and like speak Spanish and study at a Spanish institution. And so yeah, totally possible and doable. Absolutely.
Thank you for answering my question.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for asking. We did have another question in the chat, which was, is the IRT program fully online because of COVID-19? Yeah. Yep. That's the short answer. Pre-COVID-19, the only in-person experience that was a part of the IRT program was the 4-week-long summer workshop experience, which happened in July. And it was, only available to undergraduate juniors and seniors. And it was intentionally targeted to applicants who like needed to bolster their like critical theory and like coursework experience or repertoire, like background. And that's why it was targeted towards younger applicants who were like coming straight out of undergrad and maybe hadn't had the opportunity to like do any research yet or came late to their areas of expertise. And it was only available for 30 scholars out of the 150 that we admitted every year. So if you remember, in response to Terrence's question, I said that our target cohort size is about 150. So the summer workshop was this 1 month long experience that was serving a fifth of our cohort, or yeah, a fifth of our cohort. And then COVID-19 basically accelerated conversations we were already having about how to more equitably provide all of the resources, which happened in the summer workshop space in July, to all 150 scholars who participated in the program. So previously it was kind of like the summer interns were like that was the premier program, the summer workshop, the summer internship, and then the associate program, which was everybody else who didn't get to come to campus, just got kind of like brass tacks support, fee waivers, SOP support, and you didn't really get a whole lot else. It was kind of just like the bare minimum, like, yeah, we'll help you through the application process. It is completely like, if we have come so far from that now, everything has like asynchronous and virtual components to it. So we offer things live and we offer things that don't need to be live. We have way more community building spaces than we ever did before. We've got Zoom social hours and all cohort meetings at pivotal inflection points throughout the process. We've got Flipgrid videos and discussion boards on Canvas and other spaces that give students a chance to connect with each other. So the silver lining of COVID-19 was that it like put the fast track on the conversations we were already having about like how equitable is it that we spend, a huge chunk of our budget and our staff capacity on a program that only serves a fifth of the students that we assist every year. And so now everybody gets access to everything. Cheers. Okay. And then we had another question. You're welcome. This is about the portal forms. Is it okay if your field of study doesn't fit exactly the categories in the drop-down menu? For example, I marked history and anthropology, but I'm probably only applying to history of science, medical anthropology programs. Yeah, that list is super incomplete. It's like definitely not comprehensive. Just in the essay questions, clarify and specify that it would be history of science and medical anthropology that you would be pursuing. And you can even say, like, I indicated these two fields, but the more niche or the subset of these fields, that I would be pursuing is these two. And that's totally appropriate. Cheers. Yeah, thank you. Okay, team, I'm excited. This is a great group. Cheers. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the engaged head nods and the really thoughtful questions from everybody and just the community in the chat for sure. This has been a lovely session. And if it's any indication how y'all will be as a cohort, I mean, like, come on through 2023, like awesome. You were already excited, Anya. Like, I mean, could it be possible that you were more excited? Like, that's great. I feel like that was a high bar. Cheers. Okay, so reach out if other things come up. Thank you for your attention. Looking forward to all of your applications for March 1st. Good night, y'all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Good night. Thanks.